I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. Got little pots of pipe spread out all over the lot, 'cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Well, I got the seed from Mexico. Stick it in some dirt and let it grow. Put it in my garden with my peppers and my peas, and I get all the smoke I need to breathe. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. Keep it where no one can see, so let's keep this between you and me. But I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I can't tell I'm boss or I'll get fired. I don't grow much, just what I use. I work all day, and when I'm through, I smoke some marijuana from my yard. Now the policeman wants to talk to me. He says, how you gonna smoke up all that weed? He says, money's what you're in it for. Don't you know we're in a war? Now I'm gonna haul your ass downtown with me. I said, hey man, what is it to you? How do I infringe on what you do? Well, I beg your pardon if you're offended by my garden. I just can't grow Prozac in my yard. So I grow my own medicine in my yard. I give some to my neighbor for his heart. Share it with my grandma, who keeps it from her son. 'Cause we all know that stuff's against the law. Well, now there's nothing growing in my yard. 'Cause cops have called my land and both my cars. Now I have to buy my pot from a teenager in the parking lot who's growing marijuana in his yard. Oh, anyone can grow it in their yard. Say I can show you how, it ain't hard. Never mind the president, let's overgrow the government, and I'll grow marijuana in our yard. Let's grow some marijuana.
Okay, here we are doing another episode of Pot Talk. Are you hearing me, Randy?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, here, like I said, here we are doing another episode of Pot Talk, and we're waiting at about at 10:15. Rod Clash should call in, and we'll find out the latest on his cases, which is very interesting. Rod's one of my favorite legal beagles. He's an amazing guy, but I don't know how many of you people out there have heard some of the shows we've done with him, but he really goes after the system in a big way, and you might really want to tune in, because I'm sure the latest is going to be amazing, and it's time for everybody out there in Woodstock to realize what's going on with the community TV station. We have a little dictator there who's now banned Paula from doing shows there because he wants to control the show. And at the end of this show, Paula wants to read, after 12 o'clock, if we can have some extra time, Paula wants to read a letter and some stuff having to do with what's going on at the TV station. Maybe next week we'll do a whole show on it. But
Oh, you guys can have all the time you need.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful.
I can read it now.
No, we'll wait till after 12, and next week I want to really do a real big show on the bull that's going on at the TV station, and how they're driving off the regulars, and now they're bringing in their own little crew of clones to try to take over the studio. I don't know that Steve knew about that when he was talking to me, but they're bringing in a bunch of new people but not necessarily people like us that really want to do shows, but people just to take up the space so that the town can keep us from getting our message out.
Can I just give a very brief synopsis on what happened with that? That a lot of the radio audience doesn't know. You guys, namely Steve and you and Joe and Paula, were given time on Wednesday nights, told that you could do the show Wednesday nights because there wasn't anybody doing it. Meanwhile, there was a plan in saying that eventually you were going to have to give up your Monday shows, and that was specifically a premeditated attempt to do away with the simulcasting because Rich Spool, and I believe he's only acting for Jeremy Wilbur and for Bill McKenna, wanted to do away with all of the simulcasting on this station except for my show on Friday nights because I'm being physically excluded from the studio due to disability. This is how deep and nasty all this goes.
And on top of that, they gave us, Steve and me and Paula, Wednesday shows, but now they're bringing in new people to try to take our slots, and they're purposely bringing in clones to do shows, and they're trying to give them Wednesday. They got all these other days with nothing going out, but they're going to put them in on Wednesday to try to drive Steve and me and Paula off the air.
That's right. It's all premeditated, and I believe it comes all the way down from Jeremy, and who knows why. I would suspect there might be some influence peddling and buying going on here.
Oh, do tell. Oh, do
tell. And not just that, the fact that we expose all the flagrant abuses of the town board. It's their way of shutting us out. And they're using Rich Spool as their foil.
Yeah, and it's purely a case of absolute power corrupting absolutely.
Yeah, well, they're not going to be ready. If they keep pushing, then it's time for us to push back, and I'm going to push back in court, and they're not going to be ready for it when I put it together.
I'll be there with you, and I've certainly got a legal case.
Me too.
Paula, too. The fact that, Paula went in on, I want the viewers to know, Paula went in on her scheduled time. She had signed up for...
No, I didn't sign up. It was loose time, but after 6.
No, but all right. Ellen gave Paula the time, the slot to go in. So that was her time slot.
The police gave me the key.
Why don't you take over?
Well, in other words, what she's saying is that the procedure for producers is to get the key from dispatch, which is the police, and the police gave her the key, and she was there for all intents and purposes legally. And then Rich Spool called the police on her.
No. At first, he didn't want her at 6:30, which she was supposed to be from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. At 6:30, he started trying to tell her to get out. He didn't want her there, and then at 6:30, which she still was on her time, he went and called the police. Then after he calls the police, and the police come and try to give her a hard time, and she stands her ground, and she puts them on the phone to me, who told them that, if they arrest her, I'm going to sue them all. And then they went away and left. And then the next day, we went down to the police station and tried to sign a complaint against Rich for harassment, where the town, the police who work for Jeremy Wilbur and the town board refused to take our complaint, right? But they called Rich and told Rich that he should apologize. Rich sent the most bogus apology. It says, I apologize, and then right after that, he starts attacking Paula. It's not like I apologize, I shouldn't have been this way. He said, I apologize, but you're just a pain in the ass, and blah, 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 and you're this, and you're that, and you're this, and you're that, basically, no apology at all. and then we find out that now he has what's the word he used, Paula? Suspended Paula from the studio.
So let's get this clear for the audience who may not be quite comprehending what they're hearing. That as of now, Paula is officially suspended from the TV station. So I assume that means that she could no longer go there to do a show directly, that she's in the same boat, in effect, as I am for different reasons, and that we are both exiled from the TV station.
And that also makes it so Paula is my technical person. I can't do shows without Paula doing the technical stuff. So it's also a way to keep me from being there.
I guess we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, well...
Not to use the name of another show.
We have not yet begun to fight.
Yeah, really? No, but I mean, this is amazing. This is absolutely the antithesis of what public access is supposed to be. And it has something to do, and, you know, everybody out there in the audience can speculate on it, but it has something to do with the existence of this radio station. The whole thing has been done, whether it's the lack of disabled accessibility to the TV station, which the town knew about premeditatedly in advance, and they did it. We have that on paper. We have a memo from Kathy Magarelli talking about providing accessibility to the TV station from before the community center was rebuilt. We have other things from WDST and the general manager there to the town board on a first name basis, telling the town board that they have a trademark issue with us. And that nixed the entire deal that we were going to do with the town that was described as a win-win in the newspaper, and everything turned sour with the town board between all of us immediately after that. And there are many of us who believe that it's a pure case of influence buying.
Town board does not like that we shine a light on their shenanigans. The fact that we point out all of the flaky stuff that this town board did, like spend all the taxpayer dollars on creating a theater, you know, and special interests. And the fact that we talk about they give you 2 minutes to be ignored at the beginning of every meeting. And the fact that we've talked about the ethics committee saying that they acted unethical, and then them ignoring it, and the ethics committee quitting, you know, and the fact that we asked for a freedom of information of the cost of the community center, and they refused to give any money, any of the costs. If you ask them about money, none of the paperwork that they gave me gave any money, and that was what I was asking for, you know? So this is a direct attack on free speech by politicians who don't want to be exposed, don't want the public to know the shenanigans that they're pulling.
And all I can say is people should go to, without endorsing either of these box stores, Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the hardware stores in the Kingston area, and go or that place on 28 next to the Hickory Barbecue that sell kitchens and bathrooms, and find out how much a luxury double sink vanity cost with the plumbing and with the lights and with the mirrors. Find out how many thousands of dollars that is, and consider that the town will not consider that they certainly put in that vanity at the request of the Performing Arts of Woodstock. Two of them. And yet they will not spend what has to be maybe a quarter of that money at most to put in a ramp for the disabled to the TV station.
It's time for the people of Woodstock to start speaking up and support the producers at the television studio, or you're not going to have anything like what you've been getting. All you're going to get is what they allow, what Jeremy Wilbur, Kathy Margarelli, and Bill McKenna allowed to go on. Right now, they're bringing in foils to fill the spaces. They're going to try to drive us off prime time and fill those prime time spaces with bogus stuff.
You know, if it was a union shop, the word would be scabs.
Right. But
But there's one difference, Randy. The scabs would never jeopardize a public utility. I was actually behaving in a way to keep the signal on. Once I read my letter, that will be very apparent. I hope it will appear in the Woodstock Times this Thursday. I hope it's not too controversial, but it really lays it out there in just a little over 300 words.
Yeah, well, I'm sure of that, because the other thing that would be different from calling them scabs is that Rich Spool put a letter in the newspaper or an advertisement looking for people, so these people don't know the situation they're getting into.
Anyway, we definitely need the community to get behind the producers. You know, it should be the producers that have the most say-so there, because it's the producers who make it happen. We, the producers, are the ones that make all the shows. Rich Spool is a mechanic. His job is to fix the equipment, not harass the producers. And I also want to point out, Steve was there.
I'll call in 20 minutes. He had to bail someone out of jail or something like that.
Oh, all right. Rod's going to call a little later because he's got to bail somebody out of jail. But Steve Remine was there when a kid came to try to learn how to use the equipment. The kid was 5 minutes late, and what's his name? The mechanic, Rich Spool, told the kid, "Go away. You're 5 minutes late." But when Paula was there, the psychiatrist guy, you know, the guy who was selling pills and lost his license, right? He came 10 minutes late, and Rich allowed him to come in and he taught him without saying anything about it. But when the young kid came in, now I believe that they're bringing this psychiatrist guy in just as one of the shills, you know? So he came 10 minutes late, and they allowed him, Rich Spool allowed him to learn how to use the equipment. But when a young kid, I don't know who the kid was, came and said, "I want to be a producer and I want to learn," he was 5 minutes late, and Rich Spool sent him away without teaching him. Rich Spool is like a dictator there. That's what Steve said, and I got to agree to it.
Well, you know, one of the things that that seems to be in play here, and I made the analogy to Richard Nixon. Those of us who are old enough to remember the Watergate era and Richard Nixon, that whole thing occurred because Richard Nixon was paranoid. He was paranoid because he thought that people were out to get him and that somebody was going to take his place. And unfortunately, what I see as a long-distance observer is that Rich Spool seems to be acting that way. Eventually, he's going to show himself for not being qualified to be a manager. He may be a very proficient technician. He may be able to wire wires and put together a studio. But as a manager, he's clearly showing that he's got too many personal vendettas in his closet to be able to adequately deal with people in a non-confrontational way. He's even done that with me. For some reason, he thinks that I want to take over the TV station, I being Randy Steele. That couldn't be further from the truth. If I wanted to take over something, the fact that I need a ramp that's a wheelchair ramp that's in a closet, the way the town built it, would not keep me out of the TV station. Instead, I will not risk what is left of my lower limbs on those dangerous steps to even go to the TV station if there isn't equal access for me. So there's a perfect example. Plus, I've got to run a radio station. So I don't need any more work. I can take on some more work. If people like you or other people want us to tech or whatever, we could figure out how to do it and even simulcast. But what you're dealing with is a person who is so afraid of his own level of performance that he thinks that everybody wants to come in and take it away from him, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So what he should do is stop getting himself in trouble by being so worried about people's motives that he apparently isn't all that good at interpreting correctly.
And not just that. You know, one day Paula was in the studio wanting to try to do some work, and he started screaming at Fanny, and him and Fanny would scream it at each other. He does not have the kind of personality to deal with people. You know, he really doesn't. He doesn't know how to do it without being very aggressive. But like the fact that Paula was there trying to do her work, and it was just because he don't like her, as soon as he came in, he wanted to try to drive her off. And then when it was time for him to start teaching people, Paula asked him, well, can I watch your class as you teach people? Because I still need to learn a little bit. And he didn't want her there, wouldn't let her be there. Now, what's the harm in allowing a person who wants to learn the equipment to watch as you teach, a new person? Yeah.
We have a phone caller, and since Rod isn't calling immediately, do you want to take her?
Yeah, for short.
Okay, we'll take a short.
He said he'd call in about 15, 20 minutes, so we got 15, 20 minutes.
All right, well, we'll take this call real quickly if I can figure out how to do it. I think we have it here. Let's see. Okay, we got to do that. Okay, there you are. Hello. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, Joe.
You dropped Joe.
Oh, did I drop Joe? Oh, no, I dropped Joe. See?
Hello?
Oh, there we are. I got you all back. Okay, you're back.
Okay, hi, Joe.
Hi.
I just wanted to say, that what right does Rich Spool or anybody, he's a volunteer, and so what right does anybody have to say, dictate
well, Bill
who
McKenna
uses the
set this
studio
up.
and who doesn't?
Bill McKenna and the town board don't like us being there, so they've said, oh, Rich is in charge, and they know the kind of character that he is.
How can they put someone in charge of a nonprofit radio?
It goes straight to his head, and he goes on a power trip.
But how can they put someone in charge of a public access studio when it's public access? That's an oxymoron.
Yeah, well, this town board does whatever they want, and they don't play. Even at their town board meeting, we asked them, do you have rules? They said, no, we don't have rules. So if there's no rules, they can do whatever they want, and they don't care. It's like, we got the power, and fuck you. Excuse my language.
I know, I'm with you all the way. I just have a different way of I feel that, it's just none of this gets you what you want. So, I don't know. I just have a difference in strategy and tactics. I mean, I'm with you 100%.
Well, what would you do?
Philosophically.
You say you got different strategy. When people are definitely attacking you,
well, it goes both ways,
do?
Joe.
Just go,
goes
please
ways.
don't. They don't listen to that.
Can I just say one quick thing about the ramp?
Yeah, go ahead.
Randy?
Yes.
I think that Jeremy pretty much said publicly that he would let someone, if someone wanted to donate a ramp, that he would allow, and I've just heard this, that he would allow
Where and when
someone,
did you just hear this?
I just heard it, and I think even Paula said it at one point, that he, something to that effect. That
I don't ever remember hearing him saying. I've heard other people say that they are willing to volunteer to work on a ramp, but so far we haven't heard anything that Jeremy is in any mood to allow that. As a matter of fact,
the point
his
I
comment,
His
comment was that he's not allowing a ramp because he doesn't have to.
Okay, but just hypothetically, if someone did want to donate a ramp and install it, so that would really be the way to get over on him, wouldn't it? Because then, if he didn't allow them to install it, he would be blatantly showing, his true colors there.
He would be showing the fact that somebody has bought influence by giving him money during his campaign. And I leave it up to the audience.
Is that, though, Randy? Is there a third party, a disability code person, a third party you can go to oversee this?
Let me tell you who the
ramp optional, or
no. Let me tell you why there is no ramp. Because the disability code person of Ulster County is a guy by the name of Giles Malkeem, who is a personal childhood friend of Jeremy Wilbur. There's your corruption.
I haven't read the letters in the paper, but have you exposed that publicly in the paper?
Over the course of the letters that I've written, yes, because one of the first people I called about the town's reticence at putting in a ramp was Giles Malkeem, because he is the disability inspector for UCAL, which is the Ulster Center for Accessible Living. And you know what Giles Malkeem did when I was on the phone? I was just in the process of explaining that the TV producers have separate parking on the other side of the building, and he hung up on me.
Is there someone else above him that you could, like a neutral person that could really say, this is right or wrong? Or
I've tried filing a complaint with this.
I'm talking legally.
I've tried filing a complaint with the supervisor of RCAL, who never responded to my complaint. And Kirsten Julebrand,
I'm just about to, try and, look into that myself.
Kirsten Julebrand, I filed a complaint. Will you listen for a second? Kirsten Julebrand, Senator Kirsten Julebrand, took my complaint about all of this that I had addressed to Obama's Justice Department. The Abomination Justice Department wrote me back a letter saying that because of Republican cutbacks, they don't have the staff to pursue such sort of complaints, and that they were dismissing my complaint without prejudice. They recommended that I take the town to civil court if I desire to, that the Justice Department would not say that they dismissed the complaint because it was without merit, but just simply because they didn't want to invest the manpower to investigate it. This is the situation that occurred.
Well, the corruption is very blatant, obviously, right there.
That's right.
So I'm just thinking one way to get possibly, and it's just hypothetical, of course, to get over on those people is, if you called for donations or something or funding for a ramp, and then, and then have, let them install it. And if he says you can't install it, then he shows the world his true colors.
Well, why don't you call up Jeremy Wilbur and find out? I'm trying to encourage people. I've tried to talk to the guy.
Randy, I was very clear to him about my feeling about the radio station and everything else, and,
I appreciate that, and thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's why I went to the studio that day, specifically just to support, you and Paula and Raji and Steve. And,
hold on. Paula wants to ask you a question or say something.
Listen, while we wait for Rod Class, since he was calling in late, I'd like to take this opportunity, and we've got the caller on, to listen to the letter that I've got into the Woodstock Times. And the subject is Time Warner franchise versus community-owned broadband. Dear Editor, if any viewer of Woodstock TV was watching Channel 23 on Thursday, March 31st between 6:15 p.m. and 7:10 p.m. before Rich Spool called the Woodstock police and ended my transmission, please contact me at 845-901-1114 ASAP. Got that? 901-1114. If there's any listener of Woodstock 104 that happened to be watching Channel 23 cable in Woodstock March 31st between 6:15 p.m. and 7:10 p.m., please call me. I was playing a video of Dee Dee Halleck barred from an MNN, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, public board meeting in Spanish Harlem, September 2013, as it explains the federal lawsuit the Woodstock Times covered several months ago, presently being litigated by e-filing, and which I have intervened in as a right. I was trying to create for the Woodstock TV community a DVD to put on rotation, since Apple cannot resolve my problem to produce DVDs on either of my state-of-the-art computers, and our primitive TV studio can only take DVDs. If I did not broadcast this show while I tried to do my work due to a different configuration of the studio than what I learned on, since the automatic programming was not working, a blank signal would have breached the franchise agreement Time Warner has with the town. I cannot imagine that the town would take this kind of risk to ignore, to lose their valuable franchise, which justifies Time Warner taking several $100,000 per month in subscription fees. If no one saw this broadcast or saw something else, then there must be a hidden override so that what actually went out was not seen within the TV studio itself on the monitor that normally shows what is going out to the Time Warner subscribers. I believe there is an opportunity here for the real people of Woodstock to demand a better community TV and broadband, and I appeal to all people of goodwill to contact me or Joe at 901-1114 if you care about the future of free speech in Woodstock and the World Wide Web. Ensure our successful futures as either a producer or viewer of Woodstock TV by standing up for it. Whether we are rich or poor, our collective success on many issues depends on free speech, the water of life. Everything dies without water. So I just wanted to get that in, and after Rod finishes, it'll be after midnight. For anybody who's listening to this simulcast on the television station, I hope you can get a radio signal, because I can go much more deeply into this, and I'm sure that Randy has a lot to say, being a professional and understanding what it means to keep a signal on when you have made a commitment to keep a signal on. It's not just about Channel 23 going down and being breached. It's about all of the commercial ventures depend on an agreement that free speech would be upheld.
Paula, what time was Rod supposed to call?
Will be repressed.
What's that?
An agreement that free speech will be repressed.
Paula, what time was Rod supposed to call?
He said to give him 20 minutes.
All right. Oh, that's a great letter, Paula. And
yeah, well, I'm hoping that the Woodstock Times will publish it, because, Rich definitely cast me in a false light. And when we went into the police station, we went in to try to file a complaint. At first I wanted to make a claim in the court for which relief could be granted. So we stated we either want $10,000 from Rich Spool, but we know he's as poor as we all are, or an apology in the Woodstock Times. So then I got a very flimsy apology from Rich, which I answered, and I'll talk about it after 12 midnight. And Joe just
hold on, you're doubling, please. Let Paula finish.
When people are talking, please don't interrupt. Sorry. I try not to do it to other people.
I'm sorry,
when I'm on a roll,
happened,
please don't interrupt. And
sometimes it's hard to hear when two people are talking at the same time, too. Right, why don't we clear the line only because Rod has to call in?
Okay, bye, caller. We love you, but please, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we're going to keep the line open for Rod right now. And Paula, you can continue.
Okay, I just, when I get on a roll, I understand what Joe means about that. You're trying to get a certain thought out, and I'm also very appreciative that I inspire other people to have their thoughts. But we need to have a time and place for all the thoughts. Oh, it looks like we got Rod.
Okay, Paula, we have Rod on the phone, so let me put him on, and you can all go ahead.
Okay, Rod,
I
you there?
apologize. I had one
one of the guys I was in court with today got thrown into court, got thrown into jail, and I had to go bail him out. So we're just now getting home. So,
yeah, that's standard procedure for people like us. That's all we seem to be doing, bailing people out, going to court. Well, I actually want to know what's the latest with your court thing in Washington.
Well, I tell you what, Joe, Paula, a change of events happened up in D.C. Whenever I was going through the D.C. District Court for the trial, as by me coming in, Joe and Paula, nailing them under their own rules, under their own procedure. That's the same thing that happened up here in Newton today. But in D.C., I brought in the prosecution's rules and their regulations. I brought in their language. And the only thing that the prosecutor came back with for a rebuttal, because the judge finally sat down and says, look, don't you think you ought to answer this man's paperwork? Because he's got over 38 documents in here. The only thing that the United States Attorney's Office could come back with for a response is that they have no position and they take no stand. That was their argument.
Well, then what were you doing there if they have no position and no stand?
Well, that was the whole thing. Every time we tried to get into that, the judge kept shutting the hearing down. That was the whole thing. As I got to explain, and I got into the 1925 Statutes at Large, Volume 43, and it shows that it stopped on March 4th, 1925. Now, the dates are very, very, very important because in Volume 44, it picked up on December 16th, 1925. So if you do the math from March 4th to December 16th, we got close to 8-9 months missing. Well, supposedly, on December 7th, 1925, the United States codes were passed under HB 10,000, supposedly. But when you go back and you look at the statutes at large for that December 7th, it does not appear. It does not show up. So we brought into the fact that the United States codes were never passed. And when I brought this up before the judge and I handed her the Congressional Records on this, this wasn't hearsay. I actually got it from the Library of Congress. I put it in as evidence, and she looked at the prosecutor and asked, could you rebut this man? And the only thing he could do was shake his head no to the answer. And then I went on to explain that in the Federal Registry of 1935 and the National Industrial Recovery Act of 1935 is that the Congress created an administrative commission and allowed the commission and the president to codify the statutes at large into administrative regulations and codes for the agencies. And I handed her, here's the paperwork, here's the documentation. Your United States codes that you're charging me with does not apply. Here's the history that it was never passed. There's too many mistakes in it. The Senate never agreed to it. The Senate and Congress agreed to turn these into administrative guidelines for the administration. And she again looked at the prosecutor. She said, can you rebut him? And he dropped his head and she shut the hearing down again. I could never get a pass. All they could do is sit here and shake their head no. They could not rebut. That's why they could not take a position in this thing. They could not rebut my paperwork. So what ended up happening out of all this is it come down to the last days of this, and I tried some new paperwork. that was given to me, and the paperwork was sound. It was sound paperwork. I went back in and I told the judge, because of what is going on here, I want an in-camera hearing, or I want you to do a teleconference with me, because so far there's been no jurisdiction. You have nothing, and there's no sense in wasting court time. We could do this privately. Well, he got me for failure to appear, but the problem of it is, I was supposed to show up in court on October 27th in 2014. They came in and dropped and dismissed all my charges on October 23rd, 2014. 4 days before I was supposed to appear, they dropped and dismissed all my charges, and they did a brand new grand jury indictment under a new charge. And they got me for failure to appear in contempt for the charges being dropped.
Yeah, they don't play fair.
No, they don't, but that's fine. What we got into is that on my... Finally, we got to the arraignment side of this, not arraignment, but the allocution side of this thing. But I got in onto allocution, and the judge asked me if I agreed with the plea bargain that was done on the 16th. I said, well, no, I don't agree to it. I said, because your prosecutor lied to me, your public defender lied to me, your underling just ruled that the very thing that I'm charged with was declared unconstitutional. Supreme Court has ruled it unconstitutional. Massey, out of Tennessee, came in and defunded the District of Columbia for the very problem that we're having right here. D.C.'s been defunded because of this. I said, so no, I don't agree to the plea agreement. I said it was fake and false on the start, beginning with. So he asked me, he says, okay, now for the allocution. He said, do you have anything to say for the allocution? I said, yes, I do. I said, your prosecutor made a comment on the record that he now hopes that Mr. Class would learn to follow the laws the way they are written. And I asked him, I said, would you like to tell me what laws that I violated? I said, I had a carry concealed permit from North Carolina that's supposed to be under full faith and credit under the Constitution. No matter where I go, it's full faith and credit. I said, I had my stuff registered with the FBI. So I met two of the qualifications. My stuff was registered, and I had a carry concealed permit. Now, let's go back and talk about the fact that your property wasn't posted. Under Title 18, Section 930, you were required to post signs on your property to make people aware that if they came on this property beyond this point, you're not allowed to have a firearm. Your laws are clear on this. I said, oh, that's right, I forgot. Because you and I just talked here a few days ago, and you admitted in court on record that the courts don't follow the law. You guys follow theories and concepts. Don't you remember putting that on the record for me? And he dropped his head. He says, I'm going to allow you to appeal everything. I'm going to allow you to appeal the plea agreement. I'm going to allow you to appeal my decision. So, and he said, Mr. Class, you're going to pay a $350 fine. I said, would you like to tell me how I'm going to pay with this, as we're not dealing with any money? He says, I will let you take this up with your probation officer, but I will tell you this, I will allow you to file for informal pauperis into the appeals court, as there is no money. So he allowed me to file informal pauperis. Matter of fact, he cut an order for it. For them
Wonderful.
to take me informal pauperis. Because we went back and pushed the issue. Well, I got into the appeals court. I got paperwork filed in. When I left the court that day, I filed notice of appeal. I got it in. Within 30 days, I had a brief. I had a 30-some page brief I put in. Prosecution never answered it. They went 30 days and they never answered it. I went back in and filed in a notice of non-compliance. First notice. I waited 15 days because they had 15 days to ask for an extension. They didn't ask for an extension. So after 15 days, I put in a second notice of non-compliance where I have defaulted them. And I went back and I reminded them, under the Miller versus United States of 1939, Miller won his appeal court decision. He had a right to carry, but the United States took it up to the United States Supreme Court. And see, that is what people are not aware of. He took it up to the United States Supreme Court, and Miller never showed up. So the United States won that gun case on a default, not because of argument, but because Miller never showed up. So I went back and I used that in my appeal court. Whereas the United States ruled in favor of the prosecution in the Miller case because Miller failed to show up, I now demand the same equal consideration as the prosecution has missed their deadline and they have no intentions of answering my paperwork. I want a ruling on a default. Well, the appeals court said on it. So I went back and I filed a certiorari and a mandamus into the chief judge of the appeals court, filing a complaint of due process and negligence on his judges. It wasn't a few weeks later, I get a letter in the mail, and the appeal court judges hired an outside law firm for amicus curiae on my behalf, not to represent me, but to go through my paperwork and see if they could find any flaws to keep the judges out of hot water. The amicus curiae attorneys, there was 3 of them that came out of Virginia area. This was a Fortune 500 law firm that came out, that's based out of Chicago, and they got law firms in every single state. This law firm that they hired 3 attorneys. The one attorney was famous for doing impeachment on federal judges because he impeached the federal judge. One of them was one that sat on the board of the Judiciary Committee for discipline and professional accountability. And the third one that they handed me wrote up law reviews based on corruption of the municipalities. These were the 3 attorneys that they handed me.
Wonderful.
They went through my paperwork, and they put in a 240-page brief. 80 pages of it was brief, and 170-something of it was joint appendix. They went back and showed where I made all of the proper arguments based on the carry concealed permit, based on Article 4, Section 1 and 2, full faith and credit, based on the fact of the laws of equal protection under the law, the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. They went back in and showed that I brought up the case laws on this. But they also went back in and they brought up where the prosecution screwed up every step of the way. And the judges screwed up every step of the way. They went back and pointed out, Mr. Class followed the rules. Judge Kessler and Judge Roberts challenged Mr. Class on a Second Amendment issue. Mr. Class had all the right answers. They overruled his answers. The judges had to go back and remind the prosecution to answer my paperwork because they was not answering my paperwork, and I kept defaulting them. Failure to comply within 14 days. Failure to comply within 21 days. Failure to comply within 30 days. So I was racking them up between 14, 21, and 30. These were the schedules that they had, and I waited till like about 35 days, and I went back and started numbering 14, 21, and 30. I went back and showed where they wasn't doing their job right. What we have now is that this is before the appeals court. We we had to have our brief in on November 23rd of here last year, on 2015. The prosecutor had to have theirs in by Christmas 2015. Well, they asked for a 45-day extension. That 45-day extension was based on my paperwork was so complex that they needed more time to address my paperwork because of the complexity of it. Not frivolous, not nonsensical, not unintelligible, the complexity. It was too complex for them to grasp. So they needed another 45 days. Well, they got their 45 days, but I went back in under Rule 27H and made the issue is that they could not get that extension without asking my permission, because Rule 27H says you had to get my consent. And they came back in with a comment, well, because Mr. Klaus is pro se, we didn't have to ask him. Excuse me, Rule 27 sits there and says, yes, you did. You didn't do it. I want them defaulted. Well, they didn't do it, but they asked for another 14 days. Again, they did not ask me. I went back in. We didn't have to have our brief in to the 7th of March, but they allowed it till the 17th of March of 2016, which is just here a few months ago. The amicus attorneys filed paperwork in, again showing all of the errors created by the prosecution. This law firm was hired to tear my paperwork apart. They were hired to find all my errors and find my weaknesses in my paperwork, and they could not find any of it. Matter of fact, they upheld my paperwork. They brought up to where Mr. Klaus made all these issues, but they went back and showed every single error that the prosecution made and that the court system made, and they made one-sentence statement to the appeals court. They told them that they should vacate the indictment, remand it back down with an order to them to dismiss the indictment, period. Nothing more, nothing less. They were ordered to dismiss it. Well, from what I found out on, that was the 17th, on the 16th, Judge Roberts was asked to step down. My paperwork hit on the 17th by the amicus. On the 18th, Judge Roberts retired. He resigned.
Wonderful.
Now, whether it was due to my paperwork, according to the internet, there's other scandals going here. But we know how that plays out. They will make up stuff to cover their butt. But the fact that before the amicus attorneys filed paperwork in telling the appeals court that they need to vacate this and remand it back down, and with an order and instructions on how to vacate this, and then he comes up no longer chief judge, he has been forced out. Is that a coincidence? Or what?
Don't sound like it to me.
Yep. So that's pretty much what's going up. That's pretty much what we're sitting on up there. Now, we do have a hearing, supposedly an oral hearing on May 5th at 9:30 in the morning up there in the circuit court. I'm not sure what room it is yet, but it is at 9:30. We have an oral hearing going on. Now, I don't know how they're going to do an oral hearing with Judge Roberts being pulled off the bench.
Well, they have to put a replacement judge in.
Well, if they pulled the judge off the bench, then that sort of pretty much puts a hole in the prosecution.
But why didn't they go after the prosecutor, since it's obvious that the prosecutors violated the law?
Because the judge is the one that allowed it. The judge is the one that allowed it to continue. He should have stopped it. She should have just said, look, we're going to dismiss this thing. We're not going to allow you. You can't do your job right. The guy's hammering you on your rules, on your regulations. He's slamming you on the language, on your job description. we're going to put a stop to this. But he did not do it. So now, he's the one that is being held accountable for their screw up. But we don't know what happened to the other ones yet. They
Paula
may
wants
not
to
be
say
there.
something.
Rod,
Yep.
one time you said that a judge has to make an entry of appearance and also an exit properly, and that they can't just throw on different judges.
The prosecutor.
That's not true with judges.
That's exactly right. There has to be a process. That's the same thing with prosecutors. Prosecutors have to sign in with an entry of appearance. They have to get permission. Ladies and gentlemen, I went through 5 federal judges. I went through 5 federal prosecutors. And the reason why I went through so many is that I was able to come back, and like I told people on my show, I do not know how to defend myself. I don't know the first thing on defending myself. I do know how to point out their errors. And every time I was before a judge and a prosecutor, I was able to go back and show the error of that prosecutor and that court, at which point that judge postponed the hearing. I went before another judge, Judge Sullivan. He dismissed my charges. He dismissed my charges. The public defender I had sit down and said, Your Honor, this is Mr. Class. He holds position as a private attorney general. He holds position as a constitutional bounty hunter through Congress. I had checked his credentials. They are legitimate. The judge says, Mr. Class, I want you to get your Jeep. I want you to get your property. I want you to get out of D.C. now and don't ever come back. Well, that was in the Superior Court. That was 2 federal judges I got rid of. I got over into the district court, and I had one of the judges there. I'm not going to use his name because he sits on the appeal board on this thing. But I went up before him, and he sat down and swore me in. He said, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I said, yes, I do. He said, well, Mr. Class, you just swore an oath, so if you lie, this is perjury. And if you commit perjury, it's contempt of court, and I can put you in jail. I said, whoa, back up. I said, are you telling me that anybody who swears an oath, if they lie, it's perjury and it's contempt of court? He says, yes, it is. I says, does this apply to your side? He says, yes, it does. And that was the opening that I needed to point my finger at the prosecutor and show where he swore an oath to the Bar Association that he would not lie, misrepresent, mislead, misconstrue, put false information before the court under the bar rules, and the judge shut the hearing down, and I get rid of that prosecutor, and I get rid of that judge. So that was 3 judges I got rid of. I went before.
I love you, Rod.
I had her for a while. But when we got into the debate, I asked her up front in one of the hearings, right there towards the end, I asked her, who is the corpus delicti? Who is the injured party? And, of course, she was making a joke out of it, and so was the prosecutor. They was making he-he's and ha-ha's. Now, we just don't understand. Well, finally, she sat down and looked at me. She said, well, Mr. Class, you violated the statutes. I said, what, are you telling me that the statutes is the injured party? She says, yes. I said, do you really, truly want to tell me that? And she says, yes, you violated the statutes. I says, okay, let's talk about the statutes that your prosecutor broke.
Let me jump in for a second. I would have said, then I want to put the statute on the stand because I have a right to cross-examine the witness against me.
Well, you could do that, but I didn't go that route.
Okay.
Because what I did is I told the judge, I says, now, if the statute is the injured party, let me show you what statutes your prosecutor broke. I proceeded to explain under writ of habeas corpus under Title 28, Section 2255, that if I could show this court a constitutional violation or a statutory violation, that this court would have to dismiss my charges and bring charges against the prosecutor. I proceeded to explain the constitutional side of this thing under Article 4, Section 1 and 2, full faith and credit, 14th Amendment, full faith and credit. I got into Title 42, 1981, equal protection under the law. I got into the fact that I had a carry concealed permit. I got into the case law. I said, now, let's get into Title 36 of the United States Code of Ceremonies under Chapter 705 under the Federal Bar Association. This man is a federal bar agent. Under 705.03, it sits here and says how he can be disqualified from holding his job. If he advocates the overthrow of the Constitution and advocates the overthrow of our government, which he has, because he's not abiding by the Constitution and he's not abiding by the statutes, he has now advocated, he has now committed treason. He has violated the Smith Act of 1940 of being a communist and pushing anti-government into this courtroom. He violated Title 18, Chapter 115, 2385 of sedition, insurrection, rebellion, and treason. These are the statutes that your prosecutor broke. Why is this man not being put in handcuffs? She shut the hearing down and ran out of the courtroom, and that's when I got rid of her and got rid of that prosecutor. This is
Now,
what
I want my audience to know
gentlemen.
why. This is why Rod Class is one of my favorite legal beagles. Go get him, Rod.
Okay.
This is WIOF-LP, Woodstock 104. Please continue.
Go ahead, Rod.
All right. We back on again?
Yeah.
All right. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I have taught. And for them to hire a Fortune 500 law firm to be amicus curiae. Now, I didn't hire them. These people did not volunteer because this was a gun issue. They were hired by the court. They were hired by the court to tear my paperwork apart and find my flaws in my paperwork. They could not find any flaws because I used their own rules, I used their own regulations, I used their job description, I used their own language, and I pulled all my information out of the statutes at large, which was the acts of Congress, because we went back and proved that the United States Code that is created by Westlaw publication was never passed into law. It is just a publication. It is not a law book. It's a publication. And by going back and doing that to them, they really didn't have any avenue, and they cannot disprove any of my paperwork because I proved the fact that Westlaw was not law.
Let me jump in for a second, Rod.
More than a codification.
Is that ruling going to be in your court case so other people could use that when they go into court and say, according to the Rod Class case, the statutes at large, the statutes are no good?
Well, they sealed my paperwork because even the amicus curiae was not allowed in my files. They could not even get into my records. They went
that
on
should never be. How come when people win, they seal the file so other people can't use those cases?
That's exactly right. But the thing is, Joe, if you follow the same pattern that I followed, this happened up here in Newton today. I went in and I showed where the court does not have criminal jurisdiction. I went back into their criminal rules of procedure for North Carolina. It's the same way in every state. I went in under their jurisdiction, and it says they have no jurisdiction. It says it is reserved for future codification which means there is no jurisdiction, or the rules of criminal procedure does not have a section for jurisdiction. It's deliberately deleted out. There is no criminal proceedings in these courts. We got in here, the judge, I filed in for a limited power of attorney on behalf of my client. The judge and them went through my paperwork. They crapped. They would not allow me to represent him. They threw me out. So they scrapped all my paperwork. Well, this guy tried to come back in, and they found him guilty. I got him bailed out. But now we're going to go file charges against the judge and against the prosecutor, because what they're trying to come back and say, and they do it in every single state, you have to have a bar license in order to practice law. Well, I pulled up the correct phrasing out of the North Carolina statutes, and it's under Chapter 84, and under 84.2, disqualifications. And what it sits here and says is that a magistrate, a justice of the peace, a judge, a DA, assistant DA, a public defender, a clerk of court, a sheriff, any deputies, anything that is tied into the court is barred from practicing law. They're barred. It doesn't say Rod Class was barred. It doesn't say that Joe and Paula's barred. It says they are barred from practicing law.
Let me jump in again for a second. The Supreme Court also ruled, I don't remember the case, but I've definitely read the case, that the practice of law is a common right.
Exactly right. It is. And so what we're getting ready to do here in North Carolina, we have what is known as the Standard Judicial Committee. This committee is for you to bring forth a complaint against a judge or a prosecutor and bring them up on charges. Now, what's going to happen here is like everything else. They're going to come back in and they're going to say that they're not going to get involved, which is exactly what I want them to sit back and say, because when they do that, they have waived the immunity of these public officials. They now can be brought before the administrative court, have a charge placed against them on the administrative court, get the administrative court to rule that they're not public officials, take them to the judicial review to get them to admit it, and then the next step is the Court of Claims, because once you get 3 entities that go back in and say they don't work here, they're not part of the system, now we can go back into the Court of Claims and we can bring charges against them for impersonation of a public office. That Court of Claims is our court, but you have to go through procedures in order to get them there. Too many people are going to be on this call tonight is going to want to go straight into the Court of Claims. We don't want to do the other 3 steps. We don't want to go get their bar association or their judicial system to say they're wrong. We don't want to take them to the administrative court. We don't want to take them to judicial review. That takes too much time. That's where the problem is. People don't want to take the time to do it right. And this is what I've learned throughout the years. We are taking our time, and we're doing them right, and we're setting them up. They're losing their immunities. All we got to do is go back and sue them properly, and we can go back and do this. But it takes, it's something that I have been working on for quite a few years on getting the bugs worked out of this. What does it take to get this thing done? What's it take to go through and get all the bugs so I could sit here and just run them? And it's taken me time. I had to go through trial and error, but nobody else was out here doing this. I was. Now we've got it pretty much figured out that how we have to go back and do it. And this is where that standard form 95 comes in that Dwight may have talked about, that SF-95 form. This is the federal tort claim. That is your complaint. not something that you just write down on a sheet of paper. This SF-95 is your complaint, and then what you add to it, that's the proper form for the complaint.
Yeah, I filed mine in your case, but unfortunately, all the green papers, the proof that I sent it was in Paula's apartment when we got evicted, and it got lost. So I don't have proof that I sent it.
Oh, man. Well, I tell you what, there is no limitation, Joe, on starting over again.
Yeah, I intend to. Dwight's going to send me the paperwork again, and I'm gonna fill it out and send it back in.
Yeah, because see, this is the beauty of this. There is no statute of limitation of going back in, of exposing the fraud, exposing the crime being committed, because this judge looked at me when he threw me out of the courtroom. My paperwork, he looked at my paperwork, and he looked at me, and this man, he was on a phone call before my client got called up. We sat there all day. He's waiting for a phone call, and I can almost bet you it came from Raleigh on what to do with my paperwork. And they sit down and told him how to handle this, and that was a mistake.
But you know what, Rod? The fact that you put in the paperwork and the judge was informed of the law, yet he wouldn't let you do it, and then he found that this guy guilty anyway, shows that he knew what the proper law was. You informed him, and he chose to override it.
So now we'll go back and bring charges against him for dereliction of duty.
Wonderful.
You know, Joe, like I said, if we could get the people to get off of all these other avenues and go back in and understand that we have to understand their rules, their language, their job in the congressional statutes, because that congressional statute is the real law. Because once we made that determination that the statutes at large was the real law in that courtroom and not the USC codes, this made a difference on hammering them. Because I got the federal judge, I got the prosecutor, and I got the public defender, and I got the judge on record. He admitted on record that they do not use law in the courtroom. They use theory and they use concept in a courtroom. They don't use law. It's all theories and concepts. And that's how we're being charged.
Yeah, it's bogus.
That's exactly right. I just cornered an attorney here just a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago. I was with another client. I went in, and him and I had a conversation. I looked at him square in the eyes, and I shook his hand and thanked him for inviting us in, for us to have a talk. I said, I want to ask you one question. He says, what's that? I said, I want to know what you were taught in law school. Was you taught law, or was you taught theory and concept? His mouth dropped, and he looked at me. And he says, well, I was taught some on IRS, but we mostly taught case law. I said, you're telling me that you were taught theory and concept? He says, yes. I said, you're telling me that these people lost their home over a theory? They lost their home over a theory. People are going to jail on a theory? Is that what you're telling me? He dropped his head between his legs, walked out. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not dealing with law in these courtrooms. These courtrooms have nothing to do with law at all. Matter of fact, they are lawless. And this is why we, the people, need to start bringing in their own procedures, which is what the United States Code is. That USC Code is their procedure. That's their guideline. That is like you going to McDonald's or going to Ford Motor Company, and they hand you a policy book. When you're working for that company, these are your policies. These are your rules. These are your guidelines. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States codes are their guidelines. They're not yours. They're not mine. They're theirs, because the statutes at large, 1935, under the Federal Registry and the National Industrial Recovery Act, point blank says that the United States Code was made into administrative codes for the agencies and for the administration. It point blank tells you that.
Explain that a little better for my audience.
Beg pardon?
Explain that a little better for my audience.
Okay, what that means is this. Because the United States codes were never passed in 1925, the main reason was there were so many errors in it that Congress did it, the Senate never agreed to it. So because the Senate never agreed to it, they were never passed. So because they was never passed, they had to do something with them. So in 1935, when they did the Federal Registry, in order to put them on record, they went back and they sat down and said, because these are statutes, United States codes, we are going to turn them into administration procedures. We're going to make them into administrative guidelines to hold the agencies accountable for their conduct. The National Industrial Recovery Act was the same thing. Now, you got to remember, in the 1930s, we was going through a heavy, heavy depression. There was no jobs. The federal government created all kinds of agencies, all kinds of government jobs, whether they were for private contractors like Halliburton and Blackwater and some of these other ones. But they was creating all kinds of agencies. Well, they had to have rules and regulations and guidelines. So what they did is they took the codified statutes at large, and because they were not good enough for the people, they turned around and they used them for administrative purposes, for administrative regulations. So these turned out to be how the administration and how the agencies are to operate. These are their do's and don'ts. You follow me?
Yeah, and they're not for us, just to let the audience know.
Yeah, that's why it said that it was created for administration and agencies. That's what it says in the Federal Registry. It was created for agencies and administration. So it can't get much plainer than that, and you can't get it much simpler than that.
And let me just add to make it simple for the audience. And that means that they don't apply to us. So when they bring us into court and try to use these, if you use Rod's argument, you can say it doesn't apply to me, therefore you lack jurisdiction. Am I correct?
Well, you got to go into more than that. See, that's a shortcut, Joe. That's where the problem's coming in.
I'm trying to make it simple for the audience.
You have to get in, and you have to bring the laws in. Put them in your paperwork.
Right.
Carry them in. Get it on the record. No, Your Honor, the laws don't apply to me, and I'm not saying that. Here is the legislative enactment that verifies exactly what I'm saying, is that they don't apply to me. Now, unless this man, the prosecutor, can rebut it, or the woman prosecutor can rebut it, then it stands that it does not apply. They have to rebut Congress. And see, this is how you have to come in an argument. You just can't come in and say, well, it don't apply to me, and leave it at that. You have to put it into your filings, put it on the record. You have to walk in with the Congressional Records in your hand, and then you have to verbally say it on the record to show it here. That's the work that's involved in this. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts. This is like when we filed paperwork in down here to the court. We put the paperwork. I got this kid out of a contempt charge. We filed the paperwork in. It showed under North Carolina Rules of Criminal Procedure, under Article 2, under 15A 102 through 15A 130, it says reserved for future codification. We put it in writing. We cut and pasted the section of the rules, and it was verbally sit here and said there's 3 things that had to be done. And they dismissed the contempt charges against him.
Wonderful.
See, there's no shortcut in this. You have to go through a process here.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just trying to help to explain it. You and I, we do a lot of law, but a lot of the people that listen, we're talking over their heads. So I every now and then I just jump in just to try to simplify it so people can get an understanding. But
I understand that.
I agree. They got to do their homework.
Yeah, because, ladies and gentlemen, what has got us into this trouble is shortcuts. The gentleman that I just went to court with today, I told him, and I told him, read the paperwork. Understand the paperwork, because if they don't allow me to work with you, you have to be able to lay this stuff out. You have to be able to explain it. I don't care if you take 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, you can take an hour, go back and read the paperwork. Understand the paperwork. Well, what happened is we got into court. That's when he decided to read the paperwork. That's not the time to start reading. It should have been done 3 weeks ago, up till now. And then reading it in court is just a refresher, not the first time reading. And he held his ground to a certain extent, but what they were doing is they were testing him because they knew I was right. They were testing him to see if he could explain the paperwork. And when it come time, he stammered and he stuttered, and that's what hung him. He was not able to go in and say, Your Honor, this is a traffic issue here. Now, according to your rules, under Criminal Rules Procedure, under Article 2, 15A 102 through 15A 130, it says reserved for future codification. I would also like to bring to your attention, under Title 28 of the United States Code, under 547, what deals with the prosecutor, it shows that the prosecutor can only address civil actions. But I'm going to further tell you, under Title 28, under the jurisdiction of the district court, where the United States is the plaintiff in the courtroom, under 1345, it says that the plaintiff, being the United States or being a defendant, can only operate in a civil action only, not criminal, civil. It says civil in there. Don't say one word about criminal. But I also want to remind you, Your Honor, under Title 49, the United States Code, under Chapter 149, which is Department of Transportation, under Secretary of State, it clearly sits here and says that I had to have an administrative hearing up front first before the judicial. Your Honor, I have not had my administrative hearing. Your prosecutor has skipped through this thing. You don't have jurisdiction. Joe, this is what he missed. That's what he should have said. That's what he should have said. It was all in the paperwork. All he had to do was read the paperwork. It was sitting right in front of him. Ladies and gentlemen, that's where the problem lies. We pull all out of their statutes, all out of their books, to show their error, to show what they did wrong. You cannot freeze. That's why I tell you, read this stuff ahead of time. That's why we do this stuff 3-4 weeks, a month, month and a half, 2 months ahead of time. Read it, study it, familiarize yourself with it, understand it, walk it, talk it. So if you get into that courtroom and something comes up to where I can't be there or somebody else can't be there, you can run this thing, and you can run it. Even if you got the paperwork in front of you as a cheat sheet, use the cheat sheet to make your argument. And he froze. He went to jail. We got him out. But he froze. And that slight hesitation of freezing is what burned him. You follow me, Joe?
Yeah, I follow you. I I've been through it. Yeah, I follow you. I've been following you for years, Rod. I can't cite this stuff off the top of my head like you, but I understand it.
Yeah. But, ladies and gentlemen, I realize this is a lot of work, but your freedom is worth a lot of work because we have lost so much, and we have to work double or triple time in order to get our freedom back. And knowledge and understanding what their job description is, and the fact that it sits here and said, under Title 49, under Chapter 149, is that there had to be an administrative hearing, not a judicial hearing. It had to go through an administration. And they're not taking us through administration. They're taking us into these ragtag kangaroo courts. They're not running us through the proper channels. And there is a rebuttable issue because we're dealing with agencies. And when we're dealing with agencies, then we have to have administrative hearings. And they're not giving it to us. They are subverting that administrative hearing into a judicial review where we are being found guilty without that administrative hearing to begin with.
You're fading out a bit, Rod.
Yeah, this is what we're walking into. This is what I ran into when I brought charges. I had to go through proper channels when I went after the police department, sheriff department, highway patrol, and these other public agencies. I had to go through proper channels. I had to go through the proper administrative. Once we went into the administrative court, once that administrative court made the ruling, and I did not like their decision, then I took it over to a judicial review court for administrative hearings. What they're doing, ladies and gentlemen, they're not following the proper procedure. They're not taking us into that administrative hearing. They're taking us straight into that judicial review where there is no paperwork on our side. The only thing that is sitting there is that ticket because you don't file paperwork in, your lawyer don't file paperwork in, and the only thing that judicial review judge can make any rulings on is what is sitting before him, and that is that ticket. So he has to make a decision based on that ticket. This is why we're trying to get people to start filing paperwork in. Start bringing charges. Start bringing claims. Don't walk in there empty-handed. Because if you don't put something in to rebut it, then you have nothing. But this is why I'm trying to get people to understand. If you get stopped tonight while you're out, you're going down, you're going to get bread, you're going to get milk. You get stopped tonight. The moment you get home, your paperwork for an administrative court gets started tonight. You're going to file one for an administrative court to bring an administrative claim against an agency. And the second document you're going to do is a change of venue that you're going to put into that judicial court. Because that court isn't the proper court. You're changing the venue to an administrative. When you get your administrative hearing date, if you get it before you go to the judicial court, you get that date first, that judicial court has to dismiss your case. Has to. Because
explain how to do an administrative hearing. How do people find that court, or how do people go? Explain that to people.
Okay, an administrative court, ladies and gentlemen, is a court that deals with agencies. It's basically an in-house courtroom for public officials, okay? Whenever they have a problem with any of their employees, they take them to their own administrative court. We're not supposed to know about this. But that administrative court is normally sitting at your capital. It is called an Office of Administrative Hearings. It is called Administrative Court. It is called, play with the name here a little bit. But that administrative court basically has two functions. One, for them to bring each other into, but the main reason it is there is so you, John Q. Public, if you have a problem with any agency or any of their employees, like I'm having right now with a judge, prosecutor, and a state highway patrolman, I'm going to get paperwork up, and I'm going to start filing into the administrative side, bringing charges against these three. I'm going to start bringing charges against them. All right? If you got stopped and you would bring charges, and the charges have to be legitimate. You kind of go back and show where that police officer breached his procedure. You're showing procedural violations. This is why I'm telling you. You have to know their rules. You have to know their job. You have to know their job description. And if you would understand the rule books, get into their local rules, get into the federal rules, get into the civil rules, whether it is civil rules of procedure, criminal rules of procedure, rules of evidence, local rules of court, appellate rules. Ladies and gentlemen, these are their rules. The key word is rules. And what are rules? Rules are something they're supposed to go by. We know they don't, but that's not the point. The point is, if you do not point it out in errors of what they are doing and how they are doing it wrong, then you're not going to get anywhere. You can't walk in and say, well, they just didn't do their job. Your Honor, according to the criminal rules procedure on the federal level, under 3, 4, and 5, it sits here and says, before this police officer stopped me out on the street, under criminal rules procedure 3, 4, and 5, it says, number 1, he had to have a complaint. Number 2, he had to have an affidavit. Number 3, it had to go before a judge, either for summons or a warrant. Now, under Rule 4, Your Honor, it sits here and says, probable cause. His probable cause was based on, did he have a complaint? Did he have an affidavit? Did he have a summons and a warrant from this court to stop me because I failed to stop at a stop sign? Did he have a complaint? No, he did not. That's the issue here. These are their rules. And see, this is what we miss out on. We're not going back in. All right? Rule 12 under Criminal Rules Procedure. Mr. Class, I'm going to strike your paperwork. No, sir. You're under Rule 12, you cannot, because under Rule 12, I have the right to an appeal, and you cannot deface my paperwork. You cannot destroy my paperwork. You cannot strike my paperwork because you are denying me an appeal under Rule 12. Just that simple. That puts a stop to them throwing out your paperwork. Mr. Class, we're not going to allow you to bring the Constitution into this courtroom. I object, Your Honor. Under Rules of Evidence, under 402, it sits here and says what is admissible. And it says the Constitution is admissible. It says the federal statutes are admissible. It says these rules are admissible. It says Supreme Court decisions are admissible. You cannot deny me the right to bring in the Constitution whenever your rules state that they are already admissible in this courtroom and you're supposed to abide by it. If you don't like 402, let's talk about 501, Rules of Evidence. You see what I'm saying, Joe? You have to come back in. When they say something, you have to point to the rules of what they're breaking and how they're breaking it.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm glad that my audience is hearing it, and I'm hoping that they understand it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why it is so significant that we have to go back in and understand their procedural side. Because here in North Carolina, and same thing in Kentucky and several other states, I've had several people come back and do this. Their prosecutor came back and said, well, the statutes for our state says we have criminal jurisdiction pursuant to the criminal rules of procedure. Now, what did I sit here and say? They said that the statutes gave them criminal jurisdiction pursuant to the criminal rules of procedure. Excuse me, Your Honor. Your rule book here says it's reserved for future codification. So even though your statute may say you have criminal jurisdiction, it's referring you back to your criminal rules, and your criminal rules sit down and say you don't have it. So what does that do to their statute?
Makes them null and void.
That's exactly right. These are the details that when we start reading this stuff, we need to get into this type of detail and point out this kind of detail of defending what we know is right, because when you're pointing out, you're no longer defending yourself, you are now pointing out and you're making them defend theirself to something they cannot defend against, because it's their black ink on white paper, it's their rules, their regulations, and they cannot go against it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the biggest secret of walking into these courtrooms. It isn't walking in saying I'm a man on the land. It isn't walking in saying I'm not that all capital name. It is walking in and right off the bat show the errors that's being created in that courtroom. Are they going to like it? No, they are not. They're going to get real upset with you, okay? They're going to get real upset. The bottom line is you got two choices here. Either you can sit down and be sheep and be sheared, or you can start shearing them and take some of the hide off of them on what we're doing until we start using. I got 2 books. I come home, I ordered the annotated, which is the big, heavy, thick book like the Black's Law Dictionary or Webster's Dictionary book. It's a big, heavy book. Well, I went into court, and the judge called me up about the paperwork. I said, now, what set of books do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about these that I just got from the Judiciary Committee over at the Senate and House side for the criminal rules and rules of evidence? These 2 little thin paperback books? Or do you want to talk about this great big heavy annotated which has all the case laws and has all the citings of how the rules were created? Which one of these books do you want to talk about? And she looked at me and she pointed to the little books. I says, good. I want this big heavy book with all the rules and the history behind it. I want them put in as evidence. She said, well, we know the rules. I says, no, you don't, because if you knew the rules, you would dismiss this case. Because what we've already done, I've showed you rule violation. Now I'm going to put the rules in. She shut the hearing down because I put the rule book in. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the means of handling these court systems. Is it rougher? Yes. But if you take the time and you go after this, and it's the same thing with IRS, because you can get into their codes and their statutes and the statutes at large, and you can get into the National Industrial Recovery Act, and it gets into there and it shows you how the IRS was created and for the function of all these public jobs. All these public jobs under that Industrial Recovery Act that they were creating were the people who had to pay the taxes because these were government jobs. It did not, and was not intended for John Q. Public, because we were not accepting government pay from the Treasury. They were. This is why this is another important knowledge thing that if we go back and understand, we could go back and show, wait a minute, Your Honor, why am I being charged taxes? Because here is the statutes at large under 1935, under the National Industrial Recovery Act. It gets in and lays out the IRS. It says it's only supposed to tax government jobs and anybody that is working under the government. As private contractors or contractors, they are the ones who are required to pay taxes. Now, why am I working at McDonald's, IBM, GE, or working here at the radio station as an employee? Why am I paying taxes on something that is not a federal, state, municipality job? Why am I paying taxes? Ladies and gentlemen, the information is in the statutes at large of what we're talking about. These are where your arguments come in. Does it take time? Yes, it does. But if you, again, you want your freedom is based on how much effort are you willing to put into it. What is your freedom worth? What are you willing to do to keep your freedom? Is it more important to sit back and watch football, so soap opera, and have a good time? Or doing some studying here in the evenings, even if you put in 15, 20 minutes
You're fading,
a
Rod.
day, just going back in. But the thing is, once you start getting into this, and once you start understanding, it's like the Federal Reserve Act under Title 12 and under Title 31, which is money and finances. If you get into the statutes at large, don't read the USC code book, read the statutes at large, because what this gets into, what it explains, is that the Treasury Department, United States Treasury, they're using the collateral of the United States. All right, you are the collateral. They're using the collateral of the United States to go to the Federal Reserve, and this is what it says in the statutes at large. They go to the Federal Reserve to borrow credit. They're not borrowing money. They're not borrowing gold. They're not borrowing silver or platinum. It says they are borrowing credit. They're borrowing credit. When you go to from the Treasury down to the Comptroller Currency, which is the one who finances the banking systems across the country, that Comptroller Currency gives credit to the banking system because they got credit off of the Treasury Department, which they got off of the Federal Reserve. Up to this point, there's still no money. It's credit. When you, John Q. Public, go into the banking system and you borrow, you're not borrowing money because they were never given money. They were given credit. And it says, when you sign your name on that bill or that note now becomes the collateral. Not the house, not the car, and not the dog. That note became the collateral for whatever you borrowed. And that's what it says in the Federal Reserve side of the thing under statutes at large. But they don't put this in the United States Code because they don't want that information out. That's why you have to research the United States Code. Now, if you research the statutes at large, that's why you got to get into the statutes at large. If you will use the United States Code as a reference point, go down to the bottom, and you will see in blue it ever have a public law number, and it will have a statute number. It would be like 63 Stat 247. Okay, you click on that, and that will take you over to the statutes at large, and you can compare the verbiage of what that statute said that on the United States Code compared to what it says in the statutes at large. But once you go over to the statutes at large, let's sit here and say that you're under Title 12. You're interested in Title 12. Get into Title 12 and you click on that statutes at large. That whole statutes at large that you are in will deal with everything that you will find in Title 12, which is banking. You will find the legislative language in that statutes at large. You will find more detail than it goes into in the United States Code. That's why the United States Code is not law. They changed the verbiage. They left information out. And that's the same thing with Title 31. That's money and finances. Get into Title 31, the United States Code. Go down to the bottom, hit that statutes at large, and it will take you over to that whole section.
You got to talk louder, Rod.
Beg pardon?
Rod, you're coming through very weakly, yes.
If you will go into Title 31, which is money and finances in the United States Code, if you will click on that statute at large, that number, that 60 stat, whatever number is down there for stat, it will take you over to the complete set of what that Title 31 is all about. It's like 200-some pages. You can go through this thing, and you can prove every single mortgage fraud. You can prove the IRS fraud. You can prove credit card fraud, because you're going back in and you're showing, and you can subpoena the Treasury Department into any court case, and you can point blank ask them, what are you using? Are you using money or are you using credit? And you can bring out the Congressional Records as here. It sits here and says that you are borrowing credit. So is this not what this country is operating under? He's going to have to say yes. So is there any way, if we're borrowing credit, that we can pay our bills on our home and on our cars and all this? Is there any way to pay it? He's going to have to tell you no, because there's no money. It's all credit. Your signature, right here, it says, my signature is the collateral. Does this mean when I bought my home, bought my apartment, bought my car, the moment I signed that note, I signed that agreement, that this stuff was paid for automatically, because this is what it sits here and says, my signature is the collateral? You realize what, if people would start going back in and understanding the statutes at large on everything that we're dealing with and really do the research, you realize what we can do to the system?
Yeah, let me jump in for a second, Rod, just to clarify something for the audience again.
Okay.
All that paper that you have in your pocket that they call dollar bills is really not money. It's credit. They're debt notes. You want to elaborate on that, Rod?
Yeah, okay. 1933, 1932, Congressman McFadden on the floor of Congress stated on the record that the Federal Reserve note, that green piece of paper that you people have, and some of you don't have a clue, because I've asked people, do you have Federal Reserve notes? And they look at you. And then when I show them that says Federal Reserve note across the 1 to 5 to 10 to 20, then they realize. But McFadden said here and stated on the record, on the floor, that that Federal Reserve note is not money. It is a mere promise to pay you someday. A mere promise. You're not being paid today. You're not going to be paid tomorrow. But someday in the future, you will be paid, but not now. So we are handling you a Federal Reserve note as an IOU, as a promise someday that we will settle up with you. And the thing of it is, ladies and gentlemen, it lays it out. And McFadden even lays out the fact that your signature, when it is given, it goes to the Federal Reserve. That signature is the collateral. That is also in McFadden's speech. See, this is the beauty of all this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that I have talked about, I can pull it out of Congressional Records, and I can show you exactly where it is. I've had FBI, I've had U.S. Marshals, I've had federal agents that have come to me, and I have sat down with them with my computer. I have opened this stuff up. I have went back to the 1935 Social Security Act under Title V, under Section 501 and 502. I sit back and showed in 1935 that the government put a $1.8 million price tag on you the moment you were born, and that $1 million each fiscal year that you live, the state receives on your behalf, but they're supposed to be using it to discharge your debt. They're supposed to be using it to pay off your bills. I had an FBI agent come out of Washington, D.C. when I was at a meeting, and she asked me about it. And I sat down, and I opened it up, and we had the meeting. I said, I want you to read this in front of this group. And she read that 1935 Social Security Act, and it sits here and showed where the state receives $20,000 in one section, and then in the next section it receives $980,000. And if you add the two together, that's $1 million for each live verse. And that was with a S on the verse, plural, each. That it didn't mean altogether. The word each means individually and single. You are worth $1 million each fiscal year. And this is what the courts and the system is embezzling. That is when you go down to the bank. That's why your signature has worth, because that signature is based on that credit line that they put on you at the day that you were born. That's why that signature, that's why the house is not the collateral. That signature was the collateral. That signature was the money to get into your account to discharge. That house was never supposed to be taken. And the reason why they're taking the houses, and the reason why they're doing the stuff with the Federal Reserve note that they're doing, is to run a scam, because there's only so much land. And you people in New York, look how busy you are. Look how tight you are. You know, if they stole Paula and Joe's apartment, they put somebody else in it. Give them time. They'll kick these people out, and then they'll put somebody else in it. You only have so much land, and you got more people. So they could do a lucrative business by getting you to sign an agreement, take your signature, steal it, kick you out, put somebody else in it, get their signature, sell it, kick them out, get somebody else's signature, all on the same piece of property. You realize the scam that's being ran on the American people. That Federal Reserve note, like Joe said, it's not money. It tells you that in the Congressional Records. It tells you that under the Federal Reserve Act. It says that Federal Reserve note is for only Federal Reserve agents and for the banking system. And again, if you got into the National Industrial Recovery Act and you start reading this, it shows that those Federal Reserve notes were only for public officials, because this was the means of them being able to keep account of what they have earned in taxpayers' money, so they would have to pay taxes on it. It was never designed for you and I. Again, this is the value of the statutes at large, people. The information that's in this thing, you're not going to find it in the USC codes or the CFR. The statutes at large has all this stuff in it. That's why it is significant to understand it.
Rod, before we only got a couple minutes left, but before we leave, how can I get a set of the annotated codes? I've been trying to find them. How can I get a set?
You can order them. You can get a disc. They do have a disc out with them.
Can you send me the address of where I would order them from and how much it costs?
Off the internet, put in United States annotated PDFs. And I came up with a whole volume, 1 through 50, all in PDF, and they're annotated.
How much are they?
Taking them off the air by now. But that's why I got some. But I also had, you could order a disc, and you could get the disc with that on there.
Yeah, and how much is that? Because I really need a set.
Oh, man, Joe, that stuff, some of it is anywhere from $600 to $1,000, depending on where you get it at, or more.
I don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
Public library should have.
It's not cheap. Now, if you get the books, if you get the hardback books, you're talking thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
If
Did you get the discs?
CDs with one, you're talking anywhere from $600 to maybe $1,000.
Did you get the annotated on disc?
Yep.
Could you send me a copy, or if you send them to me, I'll make a copy and send them back to you?
What I did is I got them on a thumb drive. I'll have to send them down to you.
Yeah, if you would. Boy, I would love it. Thank you. I really need them.
But the other thing, Joe, which you can get in, you get into that Cornell law on the Internet, and it has footnotes. You hit the law section, you hit the notes, and it takes you down to the history. And then you have all the stuff for the statutes at large. All you got to do is go and click on all that. That's how I've been finding so much of my stuff. It's right there in front of us.
Is it Cornell Law School under library?
Yeah, look under, punch in United States Code, annotated, and it will come up like Cornell Law.
Okay, everybody, if I can just take a quick break right here and say that we are going to lose the TV station at this time. So if you want to continue hearing the conversation, tune your FM radio to 104.1 on your FM dial. That's Woodstock 104. So good night to Public Access TV, Channel 23, and now it's time for the Carousel. It is the witching hour of midnight in Woodstock at WIOF-LP, Woodstock 104. It is Pot Talk with Joe Barton and Paula Gloria and Rod Class. Back to you.
Okay, Rod.
Yeah,
we were just saying good night to we go out on television and radio. So we just lost the television station, but the radio we can keep going if you want to.
Well, I can go for a little bit. I've been going all day, Joe, and Sharon. She's at a place that she needs help here, and I have been going all day, so I can't stay on here too long.
Okay, well, we could say goodnight because Paula has some stuff that she wants to read.
Raja.
And some stuff from Raja that she wants to read, so we could say goodnight, and I'll be in touch with you sometime during the week.
Okay, but the final thing, if you will get into your Internet on the United States Annotated, all right, you'll get into Cornell Law. Pull it up, and you'll have the code, and you have notes, and you have what may be CFR. You can click on the notes or the CFR, which will give you more information. The notes will give you the public laws of when this stuff was created, how it was created. And if you click on one of the statutes or one of the public laws, it will actually take you into the statutes at large, and it will show you how that thing is supposed to be worded, if it's worded the same, the history of it.
Rod, I pulled it up right now, and what I get is U.S. Code Table of Contents, and it's got it arranged in titles. Title 1, General Provisions. Title 2, the Congress.
Get into one of the codes.
Any one of them?
Punch in Title 5.
How about Title 12,
Punch in
Banks
Title
and
5.
Banking? Okay. And it goes in a different chapter. U.S. Code Title 12, Banks and Banking. The Comptroller of the Currency. It goes to chapter.
Okay, now click on any of those, and they'll have a number, and just keep clicking until you finally get into the main screen, because you got hundreds and hundreds of things on this thing. That's why it's so big.
Right. Federal financing for banks, Section 2281. Why don't you give me a favorite that you like to use?
When you get to one section where it finally just tells you what the laws are, they will have USC code, it will have notes, and it should have the CFR on it. The statutes at large, and the statute that supposedly created that code.
Right.
And once you get into that congressional record, get into that statutes at large, then you are in a window here that you can start doing some research. But you can also pull up statutes at large. Punch it in. You can pull up statutes at large. It will give you volume 1 through 123. Put that in one section. When you go over to the United States Code and you punch in the statute, you look at the top. It will give you the year, the page, the history of it, the date. So the moment you get a year, 1955, you go over to the statutes at large, get into 1955, open it up, and look at what that page number is that you went through the USC code to get. You go over to the statutes at large and pull down to it, and then you'll have that same identical page. But you'll have that whole section of what you're dealing with.
Right.
In that statutes at large.
Well, I remember when you came up to the studios up here, you, on your laptop, you had a PowerPoint, or you had it all organized. And it was so wonderful as an editor to actually see the scans that you did when you went down to D.C. and went in and scanned all of this. You actually see, black on white, how all these, the actual congressional records.
Okay. Okay, I need to let you go, but yeah, like I said,
Thank you, Rod. Thanks for calling in.
And we'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
You guys have a good night.
Bye.
Well, thank you.
Hey, is Randy there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Anyone there?
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Right now my computer's spinning, so let's see. Joe, do you have anything to say?
Oh, it's a disc. It's supposed to spin.
Yeah, right.
Well, that was all very fascinating. All I can say is I wish I had a lawyer or somebody to do paperwork like Rod Class does. Of course, I guess he's doing a lot more of interest to more people than I would be. But, we all have our moments.
Yeah, he's amazing. I've learned so much from him over the years. And we brought him up to our studio up here, and it was wonderful to spend 3 days with him while we filmed his seminar for him. And Paula was talking about it, how he put the documents on the board behind him. So as he was talking, people could actually read the paperwork, which is the kind of work that we like to do. That's why we like doing video stuff. I mean, we like the radio too, but we really excel at video because Paul is such a good editor, and we can get our message across both verbally and visually.
I understand that, but audio is freer because it takes less bandwidth.
Well, yeah, we're not going to stop doing radio.
I'm not saying that, Joe. I'm just yanking your crank.
Yeah, well...
Let's talk about Rich Spool. That's more fun.
Yeah, well... These clowns, they keep pushing it. They don't even... When we take these clowns to court, they're going to be shocked because we know more between Rod Class, Constitution Man, and a few of the other people that I've learned from. They beat lawyers all the time. I've beaten lawyers, so I can't wait to actually take a case against this clown board and really take them to court. I'm just building evidence, just collecting and collecting, and when I have enough, I'm going to take them all down.
When the litigation starts to fly, the houses will fall apart like houses of cards.
Yeah, because you know what? They are so lame, and they think they're so smart, this town board, and they think we're the town board, and we have the authority, and we have the power. And they don't realize that 90% of what they're doing is not legal. Or not lawful. Legal, anything can be legal, but not everything is lawful.
That's right. Well, it's also just interesting to see the way licensed broadcasters, namely us, are treated by the town as opposed to the same good old boys with documentable, I guess, emotional problems that just you have to sit back and let it happen, and at the end of it, you're left asking why it had to happen. But that's unfortunately the way Woodstock seems to be.
Yeah, well, nobody has really brought them into court yet and exposed their nakedness. It's just a matter of time, before I bring them in. I'm I'm still gathering evidence, and it might take me 6 months or a year to get enough evidence, but when I do, I'm going to know that I can nail them.
Nail them to a cross at Easter time.
Yeah, Paula wants to read something now, so Paula's taking over.
Okay.
Good
morning, Paula.
Hey, I'm getting a little tired of grumbling about Rich Spool. My real issue is that I just want to get back in and be productive. So I had wanted a daily show at 12 noon, and Billy Mitchell had that spot, which I totally respect. And Billy Mitchell was the one at 11 o'clock after I was chased out by the police on Thursday the 31st. At 11 p.m., he was told by Rich Spool that I was suspended. But while Rod was talking, Ellen called me up and said, so far as she knows, I'm not suspended. So I don't know, we'll see. If we decide not to go down to the city tomorrow, we might try to go into the studio and broadcast on Wednesday, because I was hoping to be the techie while Steve Romine and Joe would be working back and forth with a documentary on Waco. I was really looking forward to that. But we'll see.
Well, you know what I call it just before you go on? 2 simple words. Bad management.
Yeah, right. Right, bad management, for sure. Anyway, I correspond a lot to Rick Siegel, who's a Woodstock resident presently living in Spain, and he knows, he was the one that had a $10 million business that went down with the towers. He was streaming all over the city, all of the live events, and for $3.95 a month, you could have, all you can eat. $3.95 a month. You could see all of the concerts that were around. He had computers and servers and stuff all over Manhattan. He was loving what he did. And then when 9/11 came along, he was so shocked. He developed post-traumatic stress over it. And eventually his original footage was used in 9/11 Mysteries, but they put soundtracks in it, which totally devastated him. He won in court, but it's still floating around. Anyway, I ask him things, and he goes, because I was explaining the simulcasting and the problems with containment on the Internet, and he said, did you know I have an FCC operator permit? I am authorized to operate any radio station that requires an FCC operator, and I am a radio telephone operator registered since 1995 with the FCC. Card carrying all the time is what he said. Then I said, what good does your license do if you are in Spain and the simulcast only goes to a primitive TV studio that refuses to go on the Internet on the World Wide Web? Or are you saying that even if the signal goes out, oh, look it, you see, they just crashed, it just crashed. It doesn't crash that much.
Oh, Paula, if I can educate you as someone who is new to the Internet but learning a lot real fast, we have one program here that's very controversial, done by Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, FAIR. They're a media watchdog group, and they seem to know, somebody seems to know when that program is being fed, because it's fed to a lot of radio stations at the same time, and then we air it later. During the middle of that show now, twice in the last 3 weeks, I've gotten an internet slowdown to a crawl where the audio starts jittering in and out, just like you've always described with your video, and like at times we've seen at the TV station. And then when you stop talking about the Bush administration's involvement with 9/11, all of a sudden the video, or the audio in this case, comes back.
Right,
It's just the nature of the internet. And
Right.
I think I agree with you. It's censorship.
Okay, so it's back again. So I said, what good does your license do if you are in Spain and the simulcast only goes to a primitive TV studio that refuses to go on the internet on the World Wide Web? Or are you saying that even if the signal goes out to a limited website, you could pick it up over in Spain and then use unlimited bandwidth? Joe doesn't think this is what you're saying. It still seems we need unlimited bandwidth, otherwise whoever limits it controls it. And he goes, it allows me to do radio shows here, which I do on 3 stations 2 times a week. It supersedes their license, so I can use the U.S. permit anywhere. It means I can walk into any legal radio station and take over control of transmission. I do not think transmission is limited to airwaves, but what the heck? Joe is right. It is not what I am saying. Your concept is correct. You send out from a limited website, and the server can be anywhere, Spain, India, Russia, and pick up the bandwidth from there. Go back to my reference emails where I laid out wish lists. There are 2 important ones you should print out, paste over your monitor, and read daily. You need to focus, bandwidth, whatever it takes. If forcing apologies from people gets you bandwidth, go for it. If it does not, what value does it bring to getting that bandwidth? Bandwidth in caps. Can we read the franchise agreement, like the rules that city boards should work under? Franchise agreements lay out terms for both sides. Let's read what the terms are and think about it from there. Focus. If it is not helping the goal, it is useless energy spent. Come on, Paula, you have been to the river Ganges. It flows like life. It does not stop for things that are not part of the goal. It flows around obstacles. It does not fret. It does not wait. It flows. Be the river again, Paula. So that's Rick Siegel in Spain.
Paula,
yes.
Do you remember the movie The Graduate?
Yes, I do.
You remember the scene where the guy was going around the drunken party, telling everyone, what's his name there, to remember one word, plastics. And in the digital world, in the e-world, it's not plastics, it's bandwidth. It is absolutely. And I agree with him 100%, including his description of the way bandwidth should be picked up on the internet for distribution of your signal. You start off with a limited bandwidth. Hopefully, many of the providers, or some of the providers, are claiming that you can get 100 megabits per second, both up and down, equal. Verizon is claiming that for Fios. If you can get something like that at your address, then you have enough bandwidth to stream either audio or video to a remote server where then it's distributed. That's the way it has to be. But you do need that initial bandwidth that some marginal cable and a lot of DSL just can't provide. And that sort of initial bandwidth to get it out is what is moderately expensive in this country, at least. It isn't as much so abroad, and that's why you need something like a library or some sort of another organization to help you fund it, because it's not going to come for free, whether that's for a municipality, a library, or you personally.
Well, I believe that public access has to be free, and you have to have the potential for a certain community of producers to have access to their message going viral. Now, this is not to say that they couldn't also have a commercial message on another station, but then even that station should never grow so big that its commercial power will now suppress any kind of hope that a little man can get his word out. For example, if anybody has enough courage to go in front of the camera and say, they should be able to say anything they want as long as it doesn't harm anybody. If it harms someone, then they should be brought into court and should be sued for defamation of character and so on. But there should be the potential, if a person is courageous enough to blow the whistle, he should be able to have a platform from which to blow the whistle. That shouldn't be restricted in any way. Even that upload, that first upload, could be restrictive. So that's why...
Oh, it is restrictive. That's the nature of the technology. But I would agree with you, in effect, for an Internet Bill of Rights, that everybody should have enough bandwidth to be able to stream a live video signal. In this technological arrangement that we have, the only reason why you don't have that, why everybody isn't guaranteed that right, whether they would use it or not, is just simply because it's capitalism and it's what the market will bear.
But, Randy, the town of Woodstock should be able to claim a right to a certain amount of bandwidth for the public access studio. And that's where the town board has fallen, and they're negligent on protecting the rights of public access producers.
I would agree with you on that. They would say that's not their responsibility. But I agree with you, but that's just what they would say.
Step back from the station and let the public access producers run it and deal with Time Warner. They can't have both. Make the deal, take all the money, and give nothing to public access.
Well, that's exactly what they've been doing for all these years, and what you see is what you get.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's time for us as public access producers to hold their feet to the fire and make them produce what the public access station needs.
But we'll get there. We'll get there. So, Randy, do you want to call it a night, or do you want to do a little bit of bank fraud with the forensic examiner?
Yeah, can you do about 10 minutes so we can make it a nice, even hour and a half show?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you remember the movie The Big Short? I don't know if you got to see it.
Oh, yeah, we got to see that. That's out on video now.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So somebody transcribed parts of it, some critical parts, and she wrote stuff, and then I was so impressed, I sent it to a couple people, including Steve Romine, because I bumped into him at the Upstate Theater when it was playing here in Woodstock.
Yeah. So about 3 days before it was released on video for the same price you would pay to see it there.
Oh, well, yeah, that's okay. It's such a great movie.
Oh, yeah.
It was so nice to see it with a group of people. I love watching things in theaters. That's kind of going the way of the dodo. But anyway, I also sent to the forensic examiner that I'm hoping that we could get him to come up to Woodstock and we can do the same type of shoot that, remember when Rod was talking about how you look up these statutes at large and stuff? I was hoping to do the same kind of thing where we bring him into a high-def studio so we can look at the paperwork while he's talking about it. So he put in addition to her transcription, he goes, here is my small addition. The Big Short movie recently released, the phrase used is, quote, fraud always goes south, end quote, meaning that at the end of the day, everyone knows everything. The banks and maybe even the trustees, now terminated after AIG bailout, may argue that they treated the money as though it was a trust asset and that they should be treated as qualifying REMIC trusts, REMIC, it has to do with real estate trusts, even though the trust had nothing in it. Alleged trustees terminated to produce the tax return of the REMIC trust in whose name, quote, collection, end quote, or enforcement, quote, end quote, is sought. The REMIC tax return is likely to produce some fireworks that end up in settlements. 26 CFR 1.860F-4, REMIC reporting requirements and other administrative rules. Homeowner would expand the request to include the financial statements of the REMIC trusts and the names of the parties who created them. The Big Short, to show the proliferation of scams that enabled the government and the banks to make it appear that there was government intervention. Like securitization, servicing, and trustee of fake trusts, it was and remains a complete illusion. The bitter truth is that the banks intentionally convoluted their scheme such that it would take intensive study, experience, training, and knowledge to even pierce the first layer of their bogus scheme based mostly on a conventional Ponzi scheme. Practically nobody in government, law enforcement, or anyone else was willing to invest the time and energy. The Big Short details how a handful of hedge fund managers employed by these banks predicted the implosion of garbage-loaded collateral debt obligations and profited from the crash. Most of these guys on Wall Street didn't care at all about the impact of their actions on regular people because they were making too much money. End quote. The banks made billions of dollars in fees from trading mortgage bonds, so then the ratings agencies came on board to make their fees for giving high ratings to those bonds. And the Financial Crisis Prevention Center, FCC, never stepped in because people from that agency often get hired by the banks. The impending market collapse is being further perpetuated by the sale of collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, groups of poor loans that are packaged together by these banks and incorrectly given AAA ratings due to the conflicts of interest and dishonesty of the rating agencies. The practice of these banks denoting a financial arrangement or transaction that has been invented for fraudulent purposes, but that does not really exist. It is not uncommon for magical endorsements and phantom assignments to mysteriously appear out of the ether when banks start practicing their voodoo Photoshop dance that raises fake instruments from the dead. So, do you want me to continue?
That's pretty funny.
Hello?
Yeah. Oh,
Hello?
Yes. Now you can hear me.
Oh, okay.
See, I have this separate control for the phone. I was laughing at that. I was finding that pretty funny right there.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, it is 26 after. So if you want to maybe wrap it up, or if you have a paragraph or two, literally more, it's up to you.
Okay.
If not, we'll just
let me just read one. It gets a little thick, but at least it shows what an impeccable examiner this man is.
Can you do it in about 2 minutes?
Yeah. I'll just do one more paragraph.
Okay.
The evidence demonstrates that people dug their heels in and reiterated that the alleged lender could not sue the homeowner without evidence of standing, in which the bank lacks since inception. 20 banks, their servants, employees, and agents intentionally failed, refused to A, provide homeowner documents and or disclosures which would have indicated that the subject loan transaction was void and illegal. Okay, I won't go on anymore. It really does get to read like a detective novel.
Yeah, that's true.
We need to prepare a little better.
Right, and it's also, I would imagine it's pretty late for a lot of people's consciousness to even be able to absorb all of this after a long day of chitter-chatter right here at Woodstock 104. So you guys
thank you so much, Randy, for being there with this wonderful radio station. I'm learning more about FCC licenses for radio stations and how they even work abroad.
And how impressive they truly are, and how minuscule people that insist on having domain over sad little TV studios can actually be.
Yeah, right. But I tell you, when the cops came, they understood what a white signal means. When you have a blank signal going out, it's alarming. That's why I still have to figure out if that show of Dee Dee Halleck actually went out that day, or if I was being misled, because it's just too weird. I mean, how could I do my work and there was no automatic programming? So I was being vigilant, protecting the franchise.
Well, yes, you were, and we tried to be, and look at what we got for it. We got thrown into the lion's den.
Yeah, I know.
All
well,
right.
Maybe that will change soon.
Well, we have your theme up, so we'll do this, and if you giggle, the giggle in the background. What can I say? So that's it for Pot Talk with Joe Barton. Also, starring Paula Gloria. And we invite you to tune in next Hang Up week for this Hang Up program, which is Pot Talk, on this Hang Up radio station at this same Hang Up time, being hung up on all the time, which is a manifestation production. And oh, didn't that sound nice? So, since we have ended, it is coming up to 1:30 in the afternoon, and we will be back on the air at noon this afternoon, and that will be with the Tom Hartman program. Right now, it's white outside, and it's cold. It's down low in the 20s, so you got to be prepared for that. You got to be prepared.
Try 14.
It's 14 now?
Yeah, 14.
It's gone down since I turned around. Loosey-goosey. Oh, yes. Speaking of people whose names begin with L. Yes, Lisa, I apologize for not being able to get you on the air tonight. It sometimes happens, and then even though sometimes maybe you should have been on the air, you know, it just, guests change their things and things happen. So, personal apology. See, I think I'm the only damn person in Woodstock who will apologize to anybody for anything. What is it about this culture that, oh, if you apologize to them, you might be legally liable? That's what this blankety blank 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 culture is all about. If you apologize to somebody, you might be legally liable. Well,
if you have a traffic accident, don't say you're sorry.
Right. We're not talking about a traffic accident. We're talking about something more like a train wreck of the town board. At this time, WIOF-LP Woodstock 104 attempts to end this broadcast day. Woodstock 104 occasionally operates on 104.1 megahertz and oftentimes uses a process of frequency modulated, circularly polarized multiplex stereo for your superior listening, envy, angst, suing, or getting back by just procrastinating pleasure. WIOF-LP Woodstock 104 is licensed, believe it or not, to Boys of a Feather Media Limited by the Ready Steady Go Federal Communications Commission, a division of the digitally demanding totalitarian abomination. Boys of a Feather Media is also licensed by the Secretary of State of the State of New York to do business as Woodstock 104 for purposes of low-power FM broadcasting at Woodstock, New York. And we don't run away and not tell our lawyers where we are. Our snail mail postal mailing address is Woodstock 104, P.O. Box 104, Woodstock, New York 12498. Hey, I hope you're out there listening. Sometimes I probably say we also take charitable contributions at that address, which is made out to Birds of a Feather, and the address is Woodstock 104. That's right, Woodstock 104. Still, P.O. Box 104, Woodstock, New York 12498. The studio telephone number is area code 845-679-9104. 14 degrees. Oh my God! There's only one thing to do. Huddle. Cuddle, snuggle, and laugh. Good night from WIOF-LP, Woodstock 104.
And on top of that, they gave us, Steve and me and Paula, Wednesday shows But now they're bringing in new people to try to take our slots, and they're purposely bringing in clones to do shows, and they're trying to give them Wednesday. They got all these other days with nothing going out, but they're going to put them in on Wednesday to try to drive Steve and me and Paula off the air.
That's right. It's all premeditated, and I believe it comes all the way down from Jeremy, and who knows why. I would suspect there might be some influence peddling and buying going on here.
Oh, do tell.
And not just that, the fact that we expose all the flagrant abuses of the town board, it's their way of shutting us out. And they're using Rich Spool as their foil.
Yeah, and it's purely a case of absolute power corrupting absolutely.
Yeah, well, they're not going to be ready. If they keep pushing, then it's time for us to push back, and I'm going to push back in court, and they're not going to be ready for it when I put it together.
I'll be there with you, and I've certainly got a legal case.
Yep, me too.
Paula, too. The fact that, Paula went in on, I want the viewers to know, Paula went in on her scheduled time. She had signed up for...
No, I didn't sign up. It was Louis time, but after 6.
No, but all right. Ellen gave Paula the slot to go in, so that was her time slot.
The police gave me the key.
Why don't you take over?
Well, in other words, what she's saying is that the procedure for producers is to get the key from dispatch, which is the police, and the police gave her the key, and she was there for all intents and purposes legally. And then Rich Spool called the police on her.
No. At first, he didn't want her at 6:30, which she was supposed to be from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. At 6:30, he started trying to tell her to get out. He didn't want her there, and then at 6:30, which she still was on her time, he went and called the police. Then after he calls the police, and the police come and try to give her a hard time, and she stands her ground, and she puts them on the phone to me, who told them that, if they arrest her, I'm going to sue them all. And then they went away and left. And then the next day, we went down to the police station.
And there are many of us who believe that it's a pure case of influence buying.
Town board does not like that we shine a light on their shenanigans. The fact that we point out all of the flaky stuff that this town board did, like spend all the taxpayer dollars on creating a theater, and special interests, and the fact that we talk about they give you 2 minutes to be ignored at the beginning of every meeting, and the fact that we've talked about the ethics committee saying that they acted unethical, and then them ignoring it, and the ethics committee quitting. And the fact that we asked for a freedom of information of the cost of the community center, and they refused to give any money, any of the costs. If you ask them about money, none of the paperwork that they gave me gave any money, and that was what I was asking for. So this is a direct attack on free speech by politicians who don't want to be exposed, don't want the public to know the shenanigans that they're pulling.
And all I can say is people should go to, without endorsing either of these box stores, Home Depot or Lowe's or any of the hardware stores in the Kingston area, and go or that place on 28 next to the Hickory Barbecue that sell kitchens and bathrooms, and find out how much a luxury double sink vanity cost with the plumbing and with the lights and with the mirrors. Find out how many thousands of dollars that is, and consider that the town will not consider that they certainly put in that vanity at the request of the Performing Arts of Woodstock. Two of them. And yet they will not spend what has to be maybe a quarter of that money at most to put in a ramp for the disabled to the TV station.
It's time for the people of Woodstock to start speaking up and support the producers at the television studio, or you're not going to have anything like what you've been getting. All you're going to get is what they allow, what Jeremy Wilbur, Kathy Margarelli, and Bill McKenna allow to go on. Right now, they're bringing in foils to fill the spaces. They're going to try to drive us off prime time and fill those prime time spaces with bogus stuff.
You know, if it was a union...
And tried to sign a complaint against Rich for harassment, where the town, the police who work for Jeremy Wilbur and the town board refused to take our complaint, right? But they called Rich and told Rich that he should apologize. Rich sent the most bogus apology. It says, I apologize, and then right after that, he starts attacking Paula. It's not like I apologize, I shouldn't have been this way. He said, I apologize, but you're just a pain in the ass, and blah, 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 and you're this, and you're that, and you're this, and you're that, basically, no apology at all. And then we find out that now he has, what's the word he used, Paula? Suspended Paula from the studio.
So let's get this clear for the audience who may not be quite comprehending what they're hearing. That as of now, Paula is officially suspended from the TV station. So I assume that means that she could no longer go there to do a show directly, that she's in the same boat, in effect, as I am for different reasons, and that we are both exiled from the TV station.
And that also makes it so Paula is my technical person. I can't do shows without Paula doing the technical stuff. So it's also a way to keep me from being there.
I guess we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, well...
Not to use the name of another show.
We have not yet begun to fight.
Yeah, really? No, but I mean, this is amazing. This is absolutely the antithesis of what public access is supposed to be. And it has something to do, and, everybody out there in the audience can speculate on it, but it has something to do with the existence of this radio station. The whole thing has been done, whether it's the lack of disabled accessibility to the TV station, which the town knew about premeditatedly in advance, and they did it. We have that on paper. We have a memo from Kathy Margarelli talking about providing accessibility to the TV station from before the community center was rebuilt. We have other things from WDST and the general manager there to the town board on a first name basis, telling the town board that they have a trademark issue with us. And that nixed the entire deal that we were going to do with the town that was described as a win-win in the newspaper, and everything turned sour with the town board between all of us immediately after that.
Me, Randy?
Yeah? Yes.
Okay, like I said, here we are doing another episode of Pot Talk. And we're waiting at about at 10:15. Rod Clash should call in, and we'll find out the latest on his cases, which is very interesting. Rod's one of my favorite legal beagles. He's an amazing guy, But I don't know how many of you people out there have heard some of the shows we've done with him, but he really goes after the system in a big way, and you might really want to tune in because I'm sure the latest is going to be amazing, and it's time for everybody out there in Woodstock to realize what's going on with the community TV station. We have a little dictator there who's now banned Paula from doing shows there because he wants to control the show. And at the end of this show, Paula wants to read, after 12 o'clock, if we can have some extra time, Paula wants to read a letter and some stuff having to do with what's going on at the TV station. Maybe next week we'll do a whole show on it. But
well, you guys can have all the time you need.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
I can read it now.
No, we'll wait till after 12, and next week I want to really do a real big show on the bull that's going on at the TV station and how they're driving off the regulars, and now they're bringing in their own little crew of clones to try to take over the studio. I don't know that Steve knew about that when he was talking to me, but they're bringing in a bunch of new people, but not necessarily people like us that really want to do shows, but people just to take up the space so that the town can keep us from getting our message out.
Can I just give a very brief synopsis on what happened with that? That a lot of the radio audience doesn't know. You guys, namely Steve and you and Joe and Paula, were given time on Wednesday nights, told that you could do the show Wednesday nights because there wasn't anybody doing it. Meanwhile, there was a plan in saying that eventually you were going to have to give up your Monday shows, and that was specifically a premeditated attempt to do away with the simulcasting because Rich Spool, and I believe he's only acting for Jeremy Wilbur and for Bill McKenna, wanted to do away with all of the simulcasting on this station except for my show on Friday nights because I'm being physically excluded from the studio due to disability. This is how deep and nasty all this goes.
I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. Got little pots of pine spread out all over the lot 'cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Well, I got the seed from Mexico. Stick it in some dirt and let it grow. Put it in my garden with my peppers and my peas, and I get all the smoke I need to breathe. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. We keep it where no one can see, so let's keep this clean, you and me. But I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I
Okay, here we are doing another episode of Pot Talk. Are you here?